Malcolm Everett was 44 years old, and for 5 years he'd been his wife's entire world. He quit his job, drained his savings, learned to braid a wig with hands that once framed houses. When Adeline's cancer went into remission 3 weeks earlier, he thought their marriage had survived the fire stronger than ever. Then he came home early for a forgotten insurance card. Through the cracked kitchen door, he heard her laughing on speakerphone with her best friend. Heard her call him her servant. Heard her say every man should be trained like that. Heard her say she didn't need him anymore. Malcolm didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just stood there, absorbing 5 years of devotion collapsing into a punchline. His wife had no idea what she'd just revealed about herself, or what her husband was capable of once he stopped being underestimated. And in that frozen moment, behind the kitchen door, Malcolm made a decision that would change everything. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The pill organizer was orange on one end and blue on the other. Malcolm had bought it at a Walgreens 2 blocks from the hospital, almost 5 years ago exactly, standing in the pharmacy aisle in the same clothes he'd worn for 2 days straight. He'd picked the brightest one he could find. Something about the color felt like it mattered, like it was refusing to be grim. He set it on the kitchen counter now, in the blue-gray dark of 4 a.m., and worked through the compartments from memory. Metoprolol, vitamin D, the iron supplement, the small white pill the doctor had added last month to help with fatigue. His hands moved without hesitation. No stumbling, no squinting at labels. He knew this routine the way a carpenter knows a familiar cut, clean, certain, almost without thought. The kitchen was quiet, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft sound of his breathing. He filled a glass with water and set it next to the organizer, exactly 8 inches from the edge of the counter, not too close to the stove. He'd learned that, too. Adeline hated feeling crowded in the morning, hated waking up to clutter. So everything had its place, its distance, its careful arrangement. He stood back and looked at it all for a moment. 5 years. He had been good at his job. Really good. Malcolm Everett had spent 12 years as a construction project manager, the kind of man who could look at a building site, all chaos and noise and competing timelines, and see the order underneath. He'd run multi-million-dollar projects. He'd managed subcontractors, city permits, budget overruns, structural surprises buried in the ground. He had a gift for turning complicated things into clear steps. When Adeline got her diagnosis, stage 3, the oncologist said it with practiced calm, but Malcolm felt the floor shift. He used that same gift. He built a spreadsheet within the first week. It had tabs. One for her chemo cycle schedule, color-coded by infusion date and recovery window. One for insurance claims, with columns for submission dates, denial codes, appeal deadlines. One for side effects, where he logged nausea episodes, fever spikes, appetite changes, data points he'd bring to Dr. Okafor's office with questions typed out in advance. His old boss called 3 times in the first month. The 3rd time, Malcolm told him he wouldn't be coming back. There was no anger in it, no drama. Just a simple truth. Adeline needed someone full-time, and he was that person. He drained the first savings account 8 months in, the second one followed by year 2. He told himself it was an investment, not in money, in something that didn't have a number attached to it. There were good memories layered into the hard ones. He remembered sitting on the edge of the bathtub at midnight, holding a damp washcloth to the back of her neck after a bad round of nausea. She'd been too weak to lift her own head. He'd stayed there for 45 minutes without moving, just holding the cloth, replacing it when it lost its coolness. She'd said, "You don't have to stay." He'd said, "I know. He remembered the wig, a honey brown one she'd picked out online, a close match to her natural color. She'd been embarrassed by it at first, wouldn't wear it outside. So he watched 3 different YouTube tutorials until he figured out how to braid the base down flat enough that the cap sat right. It took him 4 tries over 2 weekends. She cried when he finally got it. The good kind of crying. He believed deeply and without question that all of it was making them something stronger, that the marriage was being hammered into a new shape by the pressure of it, harder, more real than the easy version they'd had before. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Okafor had looked at the latest scans and said the word they'd been waiting for. Cancer-free. Malcolm had gripped Adeline's hand so tight she laughed and told him to ease up. He'd laughed too. He'd cried in the car on the way home, alone for a few minutes, while Adeline stopped at the building's front desk to check the mail. He let himself have it, 30 seconds of ugly, shaking relief. Then wiped his face before she got in. Since then, something had shifted. She'd stopped letting him refill the organizer himself. Started carrying her phone face down. Started saying she needed space, a word that hadn't existed in their vocabulary for 5 years. She brushed off his help with small things she used to accept without a second thought. Her answers got shorter. Her eyes started landing somewhere just past him instead of on him. He told himself it made sense. Recovery was an adjustment. She was learning to feel like herself again. Of course, she wanted to reclaim some independence. He was patient. He was good at being patient. By 7 a.m., he was ready to head to the pharmacy. A quick run. Adeline needed her insurance card updated in the system before her next appointment. He grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. She was still asleep. He'd be back in 20 minutes, maybe less. He didn't think to knock on the bedroom door before he left. He just went. The pharmacy line ran long. A woman ahead of him had a complicated prescription issue, something about prior authorization, and the technician behind the counter moved carefully, the way people do when they don't want to make a mistake. Malcolm waited. He checked his watch twice. He wasn't annoyed. Patience was just how he was built now. He got back to the car 20 minutes later than he meant to. The front door was unlocked, which meant Adeline was up. He stepped inside quietly, out of habit. 5 years of moving through the apartment without waking her had made him light on his feet without even thinking about it. He set his keys on the hook. He started toward the kitchen to leave the insurance card on the counter next to her organizer, where she'd see it. Then he heard her voice. She was laughing. A real laugh, loose and bright, the kind she'd been sparing with lately. The kitchen door was cracked open about 4 inches. Not enough to see her. Just enough to hear her clearly. The phone on speaker. That familiar warm buzz of a voice on the other end. Priscilla. He recognized Priscilla's voice first. High, quick, always at the edge of a joke. "Girl, so what are you going to do now? You're free." "I know," Adeline said. "I know, and I feel like I can finally breathe." Malcolm stopped walking. Something in her tone made him go still. Not the words exactly. The tone, the looseness of it. The way she said free like it had been a long time coming. "And Malcolm?" Priscilla asked. Adeline laughed again, softer this time, but not kinder. "Malcolm?" She said his name like she was picking up something small and setting it back down. "Girl, that man has been my servant for 5 years. 5 years. Every pill, every appointment, every little thing. You know how trained he is?" Malcolm did not move. His hand was still raised slightly from reaching for the door. He let it fall, slowly, to his side. "He does it because he loves you," Priscilla said, but there was no push in it. It sounded like a setup. "He does it because that's what he does," Adeline said. You know what? He means well. But Lord, it got exhausting having him hovering. Every single day like I was made of glass. I couldn't breathe. So what now? Now I don't need the help anymore. Her voice was flat and certain. I'm fine. I've been fine. I need my life back. And him? A pause. I'll figure it out, Adeline said. Priscilla laughed at that. A short, conspiratorial sound. He really thinks y'all are closer now, doesn't he? After everything. That's the thing about men like him, Adeline said. They give everything, and think that means you owe them something. Like sacrifice is supposed to be romantic. Honey, I didn't ask for a nurse. I asked for a husband. Malcolm stood in the hallway and listened to every word. He did not move. He did not make a sound. He barely pulled air into his lungs, just stood there in the pale morning light coming through the front window, holding a pharmacy bag and an insurance card, while his wife laughed about him from the other side of a door. She never said she loved him, not once. He didn't know how long he stood there. It felt like a long time. It was probably 90 seconds. When he finally moved, he moved slowly, back toward the front door, one careful step at a time. He kept his weight on the balls of his feet, an old habit, the way he used to move through loud job sites when he needed to think. He eased the door open, stepped outside, pulled it shut behind him with both hands so the latch didn't click. He sat in the car. He didn't cry. He didn't hit the steering wheel. He didn't do any of the things a man does when the floor falls out from underneath him. He just sat there. Through the windshield, the morning looked ordinary. A neighbor across the street dragged a trash can to the curb. A pigeon moved along the top of the brick wall. The light was thin and gray-yellow, the kind that doesn't decide what it is yet. Malcolm stared at none of it. He was listening to something inside himself, something that had cracked clean through, like a load-bearing beam giving way. He could feel the whole structure of the last 5 years settling differently around that break, not collapsing, but shifting, changing what it was holding up. The servant, she'd called him. He held that word and turned it over carefully, the way he turned over documents when something in the numbers didn't line up. They give everything and think that means you owe them something. He stayed in the car for exactly 18 minutes. He knew because he watched the clock. Then he started the engine. He drove around the block twice, slow, even turns, both hands on the wheel. On the third loop he pulled back into the driveway, cut the engine, and sat for a few more seconds. He picked up the pharmacy bag. He picked up the insurance card. He went inside. "Hey," he called from the hallway, his voice the same as it always was. "Got your card? I'll leave it on the counter." He waited until she fell asleep. That took longer than usual. Adeline moved around the bedroom after dinner, reorganizing her dresser, taking a long shower, scrolling her phone with the brightness turned low. Malcolm sat on the couch and watched a game he didn't care about, volume low, pretending to be exactly what she thought he was, patient, unaware, useful. At 11:15, the light under the bedroom door went out. He gave it another 30 minutes. The kitchen was dark except for the light above the stove. Malcolm didn't turn on anything else. He pulled her laptop from the charging station on the counter. She'd had him set it up there years ago, and she'd never moved it, and sat down at the table. He opened it. The screen glowed pale blue in the quiet kitchen. He could hear the refrigerator hum. He could hear the faint sound of traffic 2 streets over. He could hear himself breathe. He started with what he knew how to do. He wasn't looking for proof of anything yet. He told himself that clearly, the way he used to brief a crew before a job. This is what we're doing today. This is the scope. He just wanted to understand the shape of things. He wanted to know what he was actually standing inside of, because the floor had moved, and he needed to find the edges. He opened their joint bank account first. He scrolled slowly, methodically, the way he used to move through a project ledger looking for cost overruns. Most of it was familiar. Grocery runs, gas, the pharmacy charges, those were everywhere, repeating like a drumbeat through the last 5 years. Medical supply orders, the insurance co-pays he'd tracked in his own spreadsheet, cross-referenced to the day. Then he opened the joint credit card statement. He went back 8 months. He was looking for nothing specific, just looking. He found it on a Tuesday, a charge from something called the Alderton House, 284 $284, posted on a Wednesday night, October 14th. He stared at it. October 14th. He didn't have to look that date up. He knew exactly where he had been on October 14th. He'd spent that entire week in a waiting room at the cancer center, sleeping in a plastic chair during her 3rd infusion cycle, eating vending machine sandwiches, answering insurance calls in the stairwell so he wouldn't disturb the other families. He remembered the waiting room's carpet, a faded green pattern, almost worn through near the chairs by the window. He remembered the specific issue of a magazine he'd read twice because there was nothing else to do. He had not been at the Alderton House. He typed the name into the browser. A boutique hotel came up, small, tasteful website. Dark wood and warm lighting in the photos. Located 11 minutes from the medical complex. 11 minutes from the waiting room where he'd spent 4 days. He read the listing again. Then he closed the browser tab. He sat back in the chair and looked at the ceiling. His mind went to the work. The practical part. The part of him that had managed chemo schedules and insurance appeals and prescription logistics didn't shut off just because something hurt. It just redirected. He pulled the statement back up and went further. He went back to the very beginning of her treatment. 14 months. He combed through it line by line. He found 3 more charges from the Alderton House. He did not write them down. Not yet. He just looked at them. Memorized the dates. Let his mind file them the way it filed everything. Clean, sorted, stored. Then he closed the laptop. He sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. The next morning he was up before she was. He dressed quietly, made coffee, left a cup in the warmer for her, the same as always. Then he took his own cup, his phone, and his keys, and he walked out to the car. He sat in the driveway. The sun was barely up. The air through the cracked window smelled like damp concrete and cut grass. He found Odessa's name in his contacts. She picked up on the second ring. Malcolm. Her voice was alert, even at this hour. Odessa was always alert. She'd been a paralegal for 22 years, and she had the instincts to prove it. You're calling early. I know, he said. I need to ask you something. Then ask. He looked at the front door of the house, still closed, bedroom light still off. He said it plainly, the way he'd been practicing in his head since 2 a.m. If a spouse was unfaithful during active cancer treatment, while the other spouse was the primary caregiver, what does that do to spousal support? In a divorce? The line was quiet for 2 full seconds. When Odessa spoke again, her voice was careful and even. Why are you asking me that, Malcolm? Because I need to know, he said. Another pause, shorter this time. Where are you right now? Sitting in my car. Stay there, she said. Don't go back inside yet. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to hear. Odessa's apartment smelled like coffee and printer ink. She had a 2-bedroom place on the east side of town, the kind that looked lived in because it actually was. Stacks of legal binders on the bookshelf, a whiteboard on the wall near the kitchen with case notes written in red marker, a printer on its own dedicated table like a piece of office equipment that had never quite made peace with being in a home. Malcolm liked it here. He always had. It was the kind of place where things got done. She met him at the door with a folder already in her hand. "Sit down," she said. No greeting, no small talk. That was Odessa. She pointed him toward the kitchen table where her laptop was open and waiting, two yellow legal pads set out side by side like placemats. Malcolm sat. She poured him a coffee without asking, set it in front of him, and pulled her chair around to sit beside him instead of across. That small move said everything. She wasn't interviewing him. She was working with him. "You brought the statements?" she said. He pulled a folded envelope from his jacket pocket and set it on the table. Printed copies of the credit card records. Bank accounts. He'd printed them from the car at a copy shop 3 miles from the house, paying cash. Odessa didn't comment on the cash. She just picked up the pages, smoothed them flat, and got to work. They started with Adeline's treatment calendar. Malcolm still had it. Of course he did. He'd built it himself in a spreadsheet 2 weeks after her diagnosis, color-coded by cycle. Infusion dates in blue, lab draws in yellow, oncology check-ins in green. He'd updated it every single week for 5 years. The whole thing printed out to 11 pages. Odessa laid it alongside the credit card statements. Then she started reading dates out loud, and Malcolm started finding charges. The first match took 4 minutes to find. The Alderton House, 284 Yerdusslers. A Wednesday night in October. Malcolm already knew that one. He'd found it himself, alone in the dark kitchen. "Mark it," Odessa said. He drew a small circle around it in pencil. Clean, controllable. Odessa kept reading. He kept looking. They moved through the months slowly, the way you moved through a job site after something had gone wrong, carefully, making sure you didn't miss anything by going too fast. By the end of the first hour, they had 7 circles on the page. By the end of the second hour, they had 11. 11 charges, 11 separate nights. Different amounts. Some were under $200, a few were over $300. But the hotel was always the same, the Alderton House, and the location was always the same. 11 minutes from the cancer center and, Odessa pulled up a map on her laptop and confirmed it without being asked, 6 minutes from the office building where Adeline's company leased the 4th floor. 6 minutes from where Warwick Boone worked. Malcolm looked at the earliest charge on the list. He found the date on the treatment calendar. His first month as caregiver. He had quit his job during that month. He had filed the first round of insurance paperwork during that month. He had learned which pharmacies opened earliest and which ones had the shortest wait times. He had rearranged their entire life during that month so that Adeline could focus on getting better. He looked at the date on the hotel charge. He looked at the date on the calendar. They sat right next to each other. He put his pencil down. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at the 2 pages side by side, his careful columns, his color coding, his 5 years of work, and the small circled numbers scattered through it like something had been eating through the paper from underneath. Odessa let the silence sit. She knew when not to talk. After a moment, Malcolm picked the pencil back up and wrote the total number at the bottom of the page. 11. He underlined it once. Something settled in his chest. Not peace. Something harder than peace. Something with edges. She wasn't just unhappy, he said quietly. This started from the beginning. Yes, Odessa said. He nodded slowly. Okay. Odessa leaned back in her chair and looked at him directly. I need you to hear me now, Malcolm. All of this, she tapped the pages. Every bit of it is useful, but only if you do this right. You move too fast, you get emotional, you tip her off before the legal groundwork is set, and she has time to move assets, get her own attorney positioned, and reframe the whole story. She paused. You understand me? Yes, he said. Anger is a luxury you can't afford right now. He met her eyes. I'm not angry." Odessa studied him for a moment. She seemed to decide he meant it. "Good," she said. "Then let's talk about what comes next." He pulled into the driveway just after 7. The kitchen light was on. Through the window, he could see Adeline standing at the counter, rinsing her dinner plate, still in her work clothes. She turned when she heard the front door open. "There you are," she said, easy and unbothered, not looking up from the sink. "Where have you been?" Malcolm set his jacket on the hook by the door and walked into the kitchen. "Sorry," he said. "Ran some errands. Lost track of time." Adeline didn't press it. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands on a dish towel, and moved toward the living room without a second glance. That was new, too. A year ago, she would have asked follow-up questions, not because she was suspicious, just because she was interested. Now, she just accepted whatever he said and moved on. He used to think that was trust. He knew better now. He heated up the leftover rice and chicken she'd left in a covered pan on the stove. She'd made enough for 2, out of habit probably, or maybe out of performance. Hard to know which one anymore. They ate at the kitchen table. The television was on low in the other room. They didn't talk much. That was fine. Malcolm ate slowly, kept his face neutral, and thought about the 11 circled numbers on the page folded in the inside pocket of his jacket. Adeline finished first. She stood, carried her plate to the sink, and then stopped. "Oh," she said, casual as a weather report. "I almost forgot." She went to the counter and picked up a small stack of papers held together with a binder clip. She brought them back to the table and set them down next to his plate, like it was a grocery receipt. "I had my financial advisor put together some paperwork," she said, already turning back toward the sink. "It's just a restructuring thing. Simplifies how the house is titled for tax purposes. My advisor said it would make things cleaner going into next year." Malcolm looked down at the papers. The top page was dense with legal language, the kind that looked boring on purpose. But he could read. He'd spent 5 years reading insurance contracts, treatment agreements, and medical billing disputes line by line. Buried in the 3rd paragraph, beneath the language about tax efficiency and asset management, were the words, "quit-claim deed." He knew what that meant. He looked up at Adeline, who was rinsing her glass at the sink with her back to him, completely relaxed. "When do you need this back?" he asked. "No rush," she said. "Whenever. This week, maybe? It's pretty straightforward." She said pretty straightforward the same way she said everything lately, smooth, breezy, as if she already knew how the conversation would end. "Okay," Malcolm said. "I'll look it over." He clipped the papers back together and set them beside his glass. Adeline smiled at him, a quick, easy smile, and said she was going to get ready for bed early. Malcolm nodded and watched her go. He called Odessa that night from his car, parked 1 street over. She picked up on the 2nd ring. "She put a quit-claim deed in front of me at dinner," he said. A pause. "Of course she did," Odessa said. There was no surprise in her voice, just a cold kind of confirmation, like she'd been expecting this play all along. "Don't sign it." "I didn't." "Good. I'm going to give you a number. Real estate attorney. Her name is Lena Park. She handles marital property disputes. She's quiet, and she's sharp. Call her first thing tomorrow and take that document with you." He wrote the name on the back of a gas station receipt. Lena Park's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind with a lobby that echoed. She was compact and direct, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a manner that wasted absolutely nothing. Not words, not time, not patience. Malcolm slid the quit-claim deed across her desk. She read it without touching it, bending slightly forward, eyes moving fast. Then she leaned back. "If you sign this," she said, You are voluntarily surrendering your legal ownership interest in the property. In a divorce proceeding, that means you walk away from the house with nothing. No equity claim. No right of return. She paused. Who paid the mortgage during the marriage? I did, Malcolm said. Primarily. I also refinanced using my credit, handled all the maintenance, and managed every contractor and repair for 5 years. Lena looked at him steadily. Then this document is designed to erase all of that. Do not sign it. He already knew that, but hearing it said plainly in a 14th floor office with the city spread out below made it real in a different way. He picked the deed up off her desk and slid it back into the envelope. He brought it back to Adeline that evening, envelope in hand. I can't sign this yet, he told her. He kept his voice easy, almost apologetic. I looked it over, and I think I need my own guy to walk me through the tax side, just so I understand what I'm agreeing to. Adeline looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, just a flicker, quickly gone. Your own attorney? She said. Just to review, he said. I wouldn't feel right signing something I don't fully understand. She exhaled through her nose. Malcolm, it's routine paperwork. I know, he said. I just want to be sure. The medical release form had been in a filing cabinet since year 2 of treatment. Malcolm found it on a Tuesday morning while Adeline was at work. He'd been the one to sign it originally, a caregiving authorization that gave him access to her records for insurance coordination and appointment scheduling. At the time, Adeline had handed it to him like a chore she was glad to hand off. You're better at this stuff anyway. He'd organized her entire file: physician notes, billing codes, infusion dates, lab work. He'd known her treatment schedule better than she did. Now he was using that same authorization to pull it all back up. Odessa had called Dr. Okafor's office on his behalf, speaking in her clean, professional, paralegal voice, explaining that her client was requesting copies of all treatment records under existing caregiving authorization as part of a pending legal matter. She gave them the form number. She gave them Malcolm's name. She told them exactly what she needed, and when she needed it. 3 days later, a sealed envelope arrived at Odessa's office address. They opened it together at her kitchen table on a Thursday evening. Odessa poured 2 glasses of water and sat across from Malcolm. She didn't say anything, just set down a yellow legal pad and uncapped a pen. Malcolm broke the seal. The records were thorough. 31 pages of appointment logs, infusion notes, lab results, and physician observations covering 5 years of treatment under Dr. Felicia Okafor's care. Every visit dated, every infusion time-stamped, every dosage noted in clean official type. Malcolm had brought his own folder. Inside it was a printed copy of the shared family calendar, 5 years of it, exported from the app Adeline had asked him to manage early in her treatment because she said looking at the schedule made her anxious. He'd color-coded it: blue for infusions, green for labs, red for insurance calls. He'd been proud of that calendar once, proud of how organized he'd been, how on top of it. He laid the calendar printout flat on the table beside the medical records. Then he started going through them side by side, month by month. Odessa tracked the dates on the legal pad without being asked. They were 40 minutes in when Malcolm stopped. October 14th, he said. He said it quietly, almost to himself. Odessa found it on the pad. Then she pulled the medical record page and ran her finger down it. The infusion scheduled for October 14th, Cycle 7, 3rd year of treatment, was marked patient no-show, appointment not rescheduled by patient request. Malcolm stared at that line. He remembered October 14th. He remembered it because it had been a cold morning, and Adeline had told him the clinic called and said they were moving her appointment to the following week due to a scheduling conflict on the doctor's end. She'd said it while he was making her tea. She'd sounded a little relieved, actually. Said she wasn't feeling up to it anyway. He'd believed her. He'd updated the calendar himself, in blue. He'd planned the following week's drive. He'd confirmed the updated time. There was no updated time. There was no doctor's scheduling conflict. She had simply not gone. He flipped to the hotel statements Odessa had printed weeks earlier. He found October 14th without even needing to search. The charge was there. A boutique hotel 3 miles from Warwick Boone's office. Check-in at 11:42 in the morning. Her infusion had been scheduled for 11:00. Malcolm set the papers down. He pressed both palms flat on the table and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Just breathed. "There's another one," Odessa said. Her voice was careful. She wasn't going to make this worse than it already was. March 9th, the following year. Same notation in the records. Patient no-show. Same explanation Malcolm now remembered Adeline giving him. A different reason that time. Something about the lab running behind, about Dr. Okafor's schedule being backed up. March 9th was in the hotel statements, too. Check-in at 10:58 a.m. Her infusion had been at 10:30. Malcolm didn't say anything for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a car passed on the street. Somewhere a dog barked twice and went still. It wasn't the affair that sat heaviest in his chest. He had already made his peace, or something close to it, with the fact of the affair. It was this. The specific shape of this. She had been sitting in the middle of her own cancer treatment, with a husband who had rearranged his entire life around keeping her alive, and she had looked him in the eye and lied about her own infusion schedule so she could spend that time with someone else. She had risked her own health. She had let him believe he was doing everything right, that every appointment was covered, that he hadn't missed a thing. He had been so careful. He had been so careful, and none of it had been real. He drove to the clinic parking lot afterward, not for any reason, just because he needed to be somewhere quiet and outside and away from any room she had ever been in. He sat there for a while with the engine off. Then he took out his phone and called Odessa. "We have everything we need," he said. Priscilla Odom had never been careful about what she posted online. Malcolm had known that for years. She was the kind of person who announced restaurant dinners before she arrived, tagged locations while she was still in them, and treated her social feed like a live broadcast of her own life. Adeline had always found it a little embarrassing. Malcolm had never paid it much attention. He paid attention now. It was a Thursday evening. He was sitting in the living room while Adeline was on a work call in the bedroom with the door closed. He wasn't snooping. He had simply opened Priscilla's public profile the same way he'd been doing every few days since this began. Methodically, calmly. The way he used to check weather forecasts before a job site pour. The post had gone up that afternoon. A photo of a printed event program held in Priscilla's manicured hand, with a caption that read, "Supporting my girl at the Hartwell Foundation Gala Saturday night. Big things for big people." 3 heart emojis, a champagne glass. Malcolm zoomed in on the program. The event was a fundraiser for a children's literacy foundation. Black tie, the Alderton Hotel downtown. The caption on the program read, "Honoring this year's Community Impact recipients," and below that was a list of names. Warwick Boone was third from the top. Malcolm sat with that for a moment. Then he took a screenshot, forwarded it to Odessa, and typed 3 words. "Look at this." She called him back in 11 minutes. "His name's been in the society pages twice this month," Odessa said. He could hear her typing. "The Hartwell Gala is a big deal. Corporate donors, press coverage, the whole thing." "Adeline told me it was a work obligation," Malcolm said. "Networking. She's going to be in the same room with him in front of half her professional network. Odessa paused. Malcolm, his firm's PR listed him as attending with his fiancée. Malcolm was quiet. He's engaged, Odessa said. I'm looking at an announcement in the Tribune Society section right now. Her name is Camille Ashworth. The Ashworths are old money. Her father's family has been in commercial real estate since the 80s. Another pause. The engagement was announced 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, Adeline had been freshly cancer-free and making plans. Malcolm leaned back in his chair. He kept his voice completely even. So she doesn't know, he said. No indication she does. His announcement doesn't mention Adeline. Nothing public connects them except professional profiles. Adeline thinks she's the plan. Odessa's voice was flat and precise, the way it always got when she was working through something. Malcolm, she's been the side arrangement the whole time. He's been keeping her close enough to hold on to and far enough away that nobody sees it. And she's been running this whole operation against you without realizing she's also been played. Malcolm didn't feel satisfaction at that. Not exactly. He felt something quieter and more specific, the recognition of a complete picture. Everything accounted for, every figure in its column. The gala is Saturday, he said, 2 nights away. He didn't tell Adeline about any of it. Friday morning, while she was at the gym, Malcolm drove downtown to the offices of Robert Chang, the divorce attorney he and Odessa had spent 3 weeks preparing for. He brought the folder. All of it, the hotel records, the calendar printouts, the medical records, the financial statements, the quitclaim deed she'd tried to get him to sign. 31 pages of Dr. Okafor's records, paper clipped in the back. Chiang reviewed everything in 40 minutes without blinking. "This is thorough," he said. "I used to manage construction timelines," Malcolm said. "I don't leave gaps." The filing took less time than Malcolm expected. He signed where he was told to sign. He initialed what he was told to initial. He shook Robert Chang's hand at 11:14 a.m. and walked back out into the November air with the quiet knowledge that the paperwork was already moving, already real, already beyond any moment Adeline might choose to manufacture between now and Saturday. She would be served in due time. Chiang had been clear on the process. For now, she didn't know. That afternoon, Malcolm found the gala's RSVP link through the Hartwell Foundation's event page. He submitted his name as Adeline Everett's +1. She had mentioned the gala twice, both times with the casual certainty that he wouldn't come. "It's a work thing. You'd be bored." He hadn't pushed back. He never pushed back anymore. She had read that silence as compliance, the way she always did. He did not tell her he'd RSVP'd. That evening he went into the bedroom closet and pushed past the everyday clothes. In the back, wrapped in a dry cleaning bag he hadn't opened in over a year, was a charcoal suit. Italian wool. He'd bought it for a project awards dinner back when he still had a career to dress for. He took it off the rack and hung it on the closet door. Then he went to the kitchen and started making dinner like any other night. The Alderton Hotel was lit up like something from a magazine. Gold light poured through the tall lobby windows and spilled onto the sidewalk outside. Men in dark suits moved through the entrance. Women in formal dresses clustered near the coat check. A string quartet played somewhere inside, the notes drifting out every time the doors opened. Malcolm pulled up in the rideshare, stepped out, and smoothed the front of his jacket. The charcoal suit fit the same as it always had. He'd pressed it himself that afternoon, careful at the collar and cuffs. His shoes were polished. He'd gotten a haircut Thursday morning without mentioning why. He looked, by any measure, like a man who belonged here. He walked through the front doors. Adeline was standing near the welcome table with Priscilla when she saw him. He watched her face move through 3 separate expressions in under 2 seconds: surprise, confusion. Then something tighter and harder to name, an alertness that hadn't been there a moment before. She was wearing a deep green dress that Malcolm recognized. She'd bought it 2 months before the diagnosis, back when things were different. It still fit her perfectly. She looked healthy. She looked like herself. She looked like a woman who had no idea what was already in motion. Malcolm. Her voice was warm, automatic. The voice she used in public. "What are you doing here? I thought—" "I RSVP'd," he said. Simple, calm. "Figured I'd come support you." Priscilla made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. She glanced at Adeline the way people do when they're waiting to be told how to react. Adeline touched his arm briefly and smiled. "Of course. Well, good. I'm glad." She wasn't glad. He could see that clearly. But he just nodded and looked around the room like a man with nothing on his mind. They moved through the cocktail hour. Malcolm stayed close, but said little. He saw Warwick Boone across the room 20 minutes in. He was exactly what Malcolm expected. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who filled a room with his presence without appearing to try. He was laughing at something a colleague said, his hand resting lightly on the small of a woman's back. She was elegant, dark-haired, and entirely composed. A diamond ring caught the chandelier light when she lifted her glass. Camille Ashworth. Adeline's eyes had moved to Warwick the second they entered the main hall. Malcolm had watched that too, quietly, from the side. She'd looked away fast, practiced. The room was full of her colleagues, her clients, people who had attended her company's events, followed her campaigns, admired her work. The Hartwell Foundation's development director, 2 editors from a local business journal, Priscilla's entire social world, every person whose opinion Adeline had spent years curating. Malcolm set his drink down. He waited until the pre-dinner reception was winding down and the guests had begun drifting toward their assigned tables. The room was still full, still loud. The moment was specific and deliberate, public enough to matter, structured enough that no one could simply walk away from the conversation before it finished. He walked toward Warwick Boone's table. Adeline saw him moving. She said his name once, sharp and low. "Malcolm." He kept walking. He stopped at the edge of the table. Warwick looked up. Camille Ashworth looked up. 2 colleagues from Adeline's firm looked up. "Warwick," Malcolm said. His voice was level, perfectly conversational. "I don't think we've formally met. I'm Malcolm Everett, Adeline's husband." Warwick extended a hand on reflex, his face arranged in the easy smile of a man who had survived awkward introductions before. "Good to meet you, man." Malcolm didn't take the hand. "I want to keep this brief," Malcolm said, "because I think everyone here has had a long week." He reached inside his jacket and produced a folded manila envelope. He set it on the table in front of Camille Ashworth. "Your name is Camille," he said to her directly, his voice quiet and clear. "I'm sorry for this. You didn't do anything wrong." Camille looked at the envelope, then at Malcolm, then at Warwick. Warwick's smile had gone very still. "What is this?" Adeline said from behind him. She'd followed. Her voice had that warm, social quality still, but it was strained now, pulled thin at the edges. "Malcolm, this isn't— whatever you think this is, we can talk about this at home." "Inside that envelope," Malcolm said, to the table, to Camille, to the growing ring of quiet that was spreading around them as nearby guests began to turn, "is a documented timeline, 11 hotel visits, dates and receipts. The first one was 4 years and 9 months ago, my first month as Adeline's full-time caregiver." He paused. 2 of those dates match scheduled chemotherapy appointments that Adeline told me had been rescheduled. Another pause. "They hadn't been rescheduled. I have her medical records." The string quartet was still playing somewhere behind them. The sound seemed very far away. Adeline let out a short laugh, bright and dismissive. "Okay, this is—" She looked around at the table, at Priscilla, who had appeared at the edge of the group, at the colleagues whose faces were carefully, terribly neutral. "He's upset. We've been going through some things at home. This is not the place." Nobody laughed with her. Nobody moved to change the subject. Camille Ashworth reached out and picked up the envelope. She opened it without a word. The table was silent as she read. Her face did not change much, only around the eyes, a tightening that came and stayed. She turned one page, then another. She looked at a receipt. She looked at a date printed in Malcolm's careful, organized hand, next to a line from Dr. Okafor's records. She set the papers down on the table. She removed her engagement ring. She placed it on top of the stack of documents directly in front of Warwick and picked up her evening bag from the back of her chair. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She walked away from the table with her head up and did not look back, moving steadily toward the lobby doors until the crowd closed behind her, and she was gone. The morning after the gala, Malcolm's phone started buzzing before 8. He didn't answer most of it. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and let the calls go to voicemail, reading the room through the names on the screen the same way he'd once read a job site, quietly, from a distance, tracking what was moving and what had already stopped. Adeline had not come home that night. He didn't know where she'd gone. He hadn't asked. He'd slept better than he had in months. By Tuesday, the shape of the fallout had become clear. Warwick Boone's engagement was over. That much had been settled in the lobby of the Alderton before the dessert course. But the damage didn't stop there. Odessa called Malcolm that afternoon with the part that mattered most professionally. "Camille Ashworth's father," Odessa said, "is Gerald Ashworth, as in Ashworth Properties." Malcolm set down his pen. "Adeline's firm handles their regional marketing." "Handled," Odessa said. "Past tense. I've got a contact at the firm. The account was pulled yesterday morning. First call came in at 7:45 a.m. Malcolm said nothing for a moment. "That account," he said, "is worth—" "A lot," Odessa said. "I looked it up. It's their third largest client." He put the phone down on the table and stared at the wall for a moment, not with satisfaction exactly, but with the flat recognition of a man watching a structure he'd calculated give way precisely where the numbers said it would. Priscilla found out she was on the outside by Wednesday. She'd made the mistake of defending Adeline at brunch to a table of women who had all been in that room at the Alderton, women who had watched Camille Ashworth remove her ring in silence and walk out with her dignity intact. Defending Adeline in front of that audience was not a social miscalculation. It was something closer to a confession. By Thursday, her group chat had gone quiet. Her calls were being returned slowly, then not at all. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody announced anything. People simply stopped making space for her, the way a room naturally empties around a smell nobody wants to name. Adeline came back to the house Wednesday evening. She walked in while Malcolm was reading at the kitchen table. She set her bag down near the door. She looked like she'd slept badly in a hotel, which she probably had. Her face was composed, but barely, the kind of composed that takes constant effort and shows it. She stood in the doorway between the hall and the kitchen for a moment, looking at him. "You humiliated me," she said. Malcolm turned a page. "I told the truth in a room full of people. If that felt like humiliation, I think you understand why." Her jaw tightened. "I was sick, Malcolm. I was fighting for my life. And you stood up in front of my colleagues and made me look—" "I showed your colleague's fiancé documented proof of what her fiancé was doing," he said. He kept his voice even. You're welcome to take that up with Warwick. She crossed her arms. Her voice shifted, became softer, more careful. People are talking. My firm is being affected. Do you understand what you've actually done here? Yes, he said. I do. The move she made next was the one Odessa had predicted. On Friday morning, Adeline sent an email. It went to 3 colleagues at her firm, 2 women from their shared social circle, and 1 editor at the local business journal who had covered a wellness feature on Adeline's remission 6 months prior. The email was 3 careful paragraphs. It described Malcolm as emotionally unstable, claimed he had been resentful of her illness for years, and suggested, without quite saying it directly, that he had abandoned her during active cancer treatment and was now retaliating out of bitterness. She framed it as a private note to people she trusted. It was not a private note. It was a campaign. Malcolm heard about it by noon. What Adeline had not considered, what she had perhaps never fully processed, even after the gala, was that Dr. Okafor's records were already in the hands of his attorney and had been attached to the divorce filing as evidence. Those records were not private documents anymore. His attorney had already shared them with Adeline's attorney as required, and 2 of the colleagues Adeline had emailed had since spoken directly with people who had seen the filing. The missed infusions were in the record. The dates matched. There was no version of the story where Malcolm had abandoned a patient who had voluntarily skipped 2 chemotherapy appointments to be in a hotel with another man. By Friday afternoon, the editor at the Business Journal had quietly declined to write anything further. One of the colleagues replied to Adeline's email with a single line. "I've seen the records. Please don't contact me about this again." That night, Adeline came home to a house that felt different than it had before. Malcolm's reading chair was still there. His coffee mug was in the dish rack. His presence was everywhere in the house. In the organized cabinets, the repaired door frame, the carefully maintained order of a home he had held together for 5 years. But Malcolm himself was upstairs, behind a closed door, making plans that did not include her. She stood in the living room in the quiet, and for the first time she understood that there was nothing left to say that he would believe, nothing left to offer that he would want, and no version of herself that could walk back into the role she had spent 5 years pretending to need him for. The courtroom was small and plain, gray carpet, fluorescent lights, a window with a view of the parking garage next door. Malcolm sat beside his attorney, Raymond Chu, and kept his hands flat on the table, still, calm. The same way he used to sit in hospital waiting rooms while Adeline was inside getting her blood drawn. He was good at waiting. He had practiced it for 5 years. Adeline sat across the room with her attorney. She was dressed sharply, a charcoal blazer, her hair pinned back. She looked like a woman who had decided that appearance was the one thing she could still control. She didn't look at Malcolm, not once. Not when the judge entered, not when Raymond began presenting the financial timeline, not when Odessa's carefully assembled evidence was entered into the record 1 document at a time. The boutique hotel charges, 11 of them, every date cross-referenced against her treatment calendar. The 2 missed infusions. Dr. Okafor's appointment records, clean and official, time-stamped and undeniable. 5 years of Malcolm's labor laid out in plain numbers. The career he left, the retirement savings he spent, the mortgage payments he made alone on a salary that no longer existed, serviced instead through careful drawdowns from an account that had once been his future. Raymond had worked with a financial expert who put a dollar figure to the unpaid caregiving hours. It was a large number. It sat in the room like a weight. Adeline's attorney pushed back where she could. She called the caregiving arrangement voluntary. She suggested Malcolm had acted out of personal choice, not obligation. She was competent, and she was professional, and she did not have much to work with. The judge was a measured woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain. She reviewed documents without expression. She asked 2 clarifying questions. She was not visibly moved in any direction. She ruled in Malcolm's favor on the house, on the settlement figure, on the caregiving labor valuation that Raymond had argued with careful, documented precision. It took 11 minutes. Outside the courthouse, Raymond shook Malcolm's hand and said something about final paperwork and timelines. Malcolm nodded. He heard the words. He processed them and filed them away. He stood on the courthouse steps for a moment in the gray afternoon light, hands in his coat pockets, breathing the cold air. No fist raised, no exhale of triumph. Just a man standing in the quiet after a long thing was finally finished. Odessa came up beside him. She didn't say anything right away. That was one of the things he appreciated most about her. She knew when silence was the appropriate response to a moment. Then she said, "You doing okay?" "Yeah," he said. And he meant it. Adeline, in the months that followed, never said she was sorry. Not to Malcolm. Not to anyone, as far as he heard. What she said, when she said anything at all, was that the system had been unfair, that Malcolm had manipulated the records, that Warwick had used her, and she was the real victim in all of it. She said these things to a shrinking audience. The professional damage from the Ashworth account had rippled outward in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. Her firm had reassigned 2 of her key accounts to other executives by spring. A promotion she'd been expecting had quietly gone to someone else. She was not destroyed. She was diminished. And she seemed to have no framework, none, for understanding why, no ability to trace the line from her own choices to where she now stood. Malcolm knew this because Odessa still heard things. Not gossip, exactly. Just information. The world is smaller than people remember when they're burning it down. He listened when Odessa told him. He didn't respond much. Then he moved on. 18 months after the courthouse steps, Malcolm's consultancy occupied a clean, sun-lit office on the 4th floor of a building 3 miles from the house he'd kept. The business was called Everett Project Solutions. Modest name, serious work. He had 4 steady clients and 2 more in negotiation, all of them construction and development firms that needed someone who could read a timeline and hold a project together under pressure. Malcolm was very good at that. He had always been very good at that. Odessa managed the contracts from a desk near the window. She had her coffee, her annotated documents, her instinct for spotting a bad clause from 30 feet away. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. On Thursday evenings, Malcolm drove to a community center across town, where he ran a support group for men who had served as primary caregivers for seriously ill partners. There were 7 of them, rotating, sometimes more. They sat in a circle of folding chairs and talked honestly about things that men in that situation were not usually given permission to name. The exhaustion, the grief, the love that didn't disappear just because it had been betrayed. Malcolm didn't lead from a place of anger. He led from the other side of it. He received the message on a Thursday, just before he left for the group. It came through a mutual acquaintance, a brief, careful text relaying that Adeline had been asking about him, struggling financially, alone, wondering, apparently, how he was doing. Malcolm read it once. He set his phone face down on his desk. Then he picked up his keys, turned off the office light, and walked outside into the cool evening air, where his life, his real life, rebuilt beam by beam from what she'd left him, was waiting. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.